You are listening to the I Choose My Best Life podcast with Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, a show that is dedicated to helping you live fully, love boldly, and rest intentionally. For additional resources, visit ichoosemybestlife.com.
This month, I invite you to be a part of the Victory Over Victimhood movement, supporting and empowering women affected by abuse. You can contribute by visiting your local shelter, inquiring of their needs, and giving in the ways of clothing for interviews, makeup, meal, or even monetary gifts. Use the hashtag Victory Over Victimhood to invite your friends to be a part of the movement and to unlock a wave of generosity and love so that others can also live their best life. Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Saundra, and you're listening to I Choose My Best Life. Today, we are chatting with Danielle Cobo. She is an international female speaker who has over 15 years of corporate experience and is the author of the book Unstoppable Grit and the host of the podcast by the same name. Excited to have her with me today because we're going to talk about why do we even need grit? What is it, and what do we need to be able to be unstoppable? Danielle, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's begin with just answering that question. What is grit, and why is it a topic that you've become so passionate about?
Grit, Angela Worth gives a definition of what grit is, and grit is when passion and perseverance towards long-term goals. I believe that is absolutely true, but in order to be gritty, it's important that we have clarity on what our passions are, what our goals are, so that we can have the perseverance to keep going. And grit is when you put action in place. So when setbacks occur, we're always focused on taking action and moving forward.
Now, when did this enter into your life? I know your husband was in the military, and I know that you was running at some point a Fortune 500 company. You had a managing role within a large company. When did you notice that this was an area that either you needed more development in, or maybe you're like me, sometimes you're like, you know what? I don't have this thing. I know I see other people with it, and I need to figure out how to up level myself.
I believe that there's characteristics that are either innate within us and then that are developed over time. And at an early age, I believe that the experiences that shaped who I am today and why I became gritty was because the early experiences that I had in my life. So when I was 2 years old, I was taken from my father. So my earliest childhood memories were of my dad trying to come and pick me up and take me to a baseball game. And I was so excited, but my mom wouldn't let me see him. And I just remember my arms wrapped around the bottom of her leg and me crying and saying, I just want to go, I just want to go. And she wouldn't let me. It ended up being just a couple months after that, she ended up leaving and not telling my dad where I was. And I didn't meet my dad until I was 15. And so I grew up believing in many ways that I wasn't worthy of love, that I wasn't worthy of having relationships, that he had chosen another family. And I believe that shaped me in a lot of ways because it did make me guarded, but it also made me very protective in the sense of I need to take care of myself. And in a lot of ways, because I didn't know that growing up, I saw my mom who embodied grit. She was tenacious. She was determined. She was driven and motivated. She was a single mom. She was going to school full time, getting her bachelor's degree while working. And I saw her go from absolutely nothing to building a very successful career, becoming a manager for a Fortune 500 company, one of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies. And she was a female in the early 1990s, which wasn't as much as where we are today. So I believe that my mom modeled grit for me, but I also believe that a lot of the experiences and the challenges that I went through in life also is what developed grit within inside me.
And we have a lot of military spouses that listen to the show. And I'm curious, when during that time that as a wife of someone who's in deployment and having the experience that you had with your mom, as a mom yourself, what are some of those characteristics that you're seeing that are helpful for really any mom who's having to process through difficult seasons?
Being agile. So because I was raised by a single mom and we were moving all of the time, just being able to afford one place over another, I'd moved 27 times before the age of 30. And I think that really prepared me for the military life, because as soon as my husband joined the military, and he joined later in life, he joined when he was 32 years old, 8 months after we got married. So it really prepared me for this life of saying, okay, you get to be agile, you get to move around, but it's okay. Everything that you've gone through in life has helped prepared you for this type of role that you're now going to be in as a military spouse.
Now, one of the types of resilience I know that has gotten a lot of attention lately is emotional resilience. A lot of us are understanding, as you'd mentioned, that there are some emotional things that we brought with us from our childhood. There are some feelings that were not resolved and that may still be affecting our current relationships. How did you process through some of the emotions as they related to your husband going into the military, as you mentioned, and as relates to your mom? Because I know that you lost your mom as well. Is that correct?
Yes, I did lose my mom. So I lost my mom to suicide March 8th, 2020. And it was a devastating moment in my life. And even though my mom and I had our differences, and maybe I definitely don't agree with the decisions that she made, she's still my mom. She's still somebody to care and love about. And I would never, it's devastating to see that she was in such a depressed state that she felt that the only option was to take her life. And that has a lot to do with mental health and the resources that are or are not available out there, whether we utilize them. But I believe that with being a military spouse, I think that there's one thing that I've learned is we can either focus on what's happening to us, or we can focus on what's happened, what we've experienced, what we've overcome, and how are we preparing for the future. Because when my husband was deployed for a year, I couldn't focus on it. I wouldn't serve me to focus on he's in a dangerous area, he's in a war zone, he could possibly not come home. That would consume, if I were to focus in on everything that could go wrong, it would cause worry and anxiety, and I wouldn't be able to function as a great mother and the mother that my kids needed to be if I was focusing on what could go wrong. Instead, it was focusing on what could go right. He could be in a dangerous area, but he's also been prepared and he's done the training and his due diligence and preparing for that particular time. And I know that he's going to come back, and I'm going to focus in on him coming back. So I believe that's part of that emotional resilience, is when you're focusing in on what is and what is not serving you so that you can focus in on what you can control.
Now, you've written a book on this topic titled Unstoppable Grit. What are some of the key insights that you have learned in this process, both from your personal life as well as in this process of researching and writing your book?
What I've learned through the experience is the more that we can better understand ourselves. And what I mean by that is a lot of how we define success and who we are is based off of what society has told us. The movies that we've watched growing up, or what our parents have told us what success is, or what society and social media has told us. But when we truly understand who we are, and at the core, what are our core values? What do we get most excited about? What are we passionate about? How do we feel? What experiences have we experienced that have shaped us into who we are today? When we understand and better understand who we are at the core, we can live a more fulfilling life. And when we're faced with challenges, we have the tools to best react and move forward.
One part of your story that interested me, because it's a topic that I spend a lot of time researching and a lot of time discussing with people, is regarding burnout. And I know that at one point during your journey, you had your own burnout experience. What were the circumstances around it? And what did burnout look like to you?
I've experienced burnout multiple times throughout my life, but the most memorable and I think the most impactful time that shifted my perspective and changed how I approach burnout now is when I was suffering from postpartum depression. I have twin boys. They're 6 now, but when they were born 6 weeks premature. And I distinctly remember that moment when they were pulling them out of me. And I just remember they were rushed to the side. There was 5 nurses on each of them, and they were rushed to the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit. And one of them had come out blue. Now, gratefully, he is 6 now, so he is healthy, but they spent 17 days in the NICU. And I will always remember hearing those beeping of those monitors, of the moments of when they would desaturate and they would forget to breathe, and we'd had to unwrap them and tickle their feet a little bit so that they would breathe again. And I believe that was just the very start to what was creating postpartum depression and what was creating burnout for me. Just 2 weeks after they got out of the NICU, I was exhausted. It would take 1.5 hours to feed one, an hour and a half to feed the other. And it was round the clock every 3 hours. They were premature. They would have to constantly be fed. They didn't have enough weight on them to be able to sleep through the night. And that exhaustion was just taking over my body. I wasn't eating. I wasn't hydrating enough. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I was sleep deprived. And all of that compounded. And eventually, I remember walking down the hallway and this excruciating sharp pain hit my stomach. I hunched over, ran to my bed and laid down and called my husband. And I said, I don't know what's going on, but I need to go to the hospital. I ended up having gallstones at the time. And while I'm in the hospital and the doctor's informing me that I need to have my gallbladder removed, I look up at the TV and it says, breaking news, Category 5 hurricane headed to Tampa. And it was Hurricane Irma. Just shy a couple minutes after that, I get a call from my husband. He's been activated to go move helicopters from the Tampa area up to the Northeast because he's a Black Hawk pilot. So I remember looking at the physician, and gratefully the gallstones had passed. But I let him know I couldn't have surgery. I needed to go home and I needed to board up my house and prep for this hurricane. It was the first hurricane that we were going to experience because we weren't from Florida. And he looked at me and he said, it's not a matter of if you're going to have gallstones again. It's a matter of when. So as soon as this hurricane passes, you're coming back and you're having surgery. We ended up having the hurricane. It went right over our house. By the time it got to us, it was about a Category 3. But we boarded up our whole house. We lost energy for 4 days. One of my boys was hooked up to a heart monitor to our generator. So we had enough to heat up to turn some fans on to cool down the house because it was about 100 degrees outside because it was the heat of the humidity. And all of this experience of the sleep deprivation, the not eating, the gallstones, all of this compounded into burnout. And every single night at 5 o'clock would cry. I just felt like so depleted. I didn't even know how to move forward. And it was that moment when I realized that in order to show up as a good mom, in order to take care of my babies, I first need to take care of me. And so since that moment, I've always believed, take care of you first, then your family, then your business. Because we can't show up as a good spouse, as a good parent, as a good coworker or employee if we're not taking care of ourselves. And then take care of our family, because if there's turmoil at home, we're not going to be as effective at work either. So in that order is where I really learned the importance and the prioritization of taking care of self-care.
I think that there's so much wisdom in what you just shared regarding being aware of how your body's feeling, being aware of the circumstances around your burnout situation, because oftentimes burnout is a combination of a lot of things hitting all at once, and you start noticing the symptoms more, although some of the symptoms may have already had initially started before they get to that point of before they're more apparent, I should say. They're more at the forefront of your life. This can also happen professionally, however, as well, similar to what you mentioned in your personal life. Have you had any experiences where professionally you felt as if kind of the same amount of all the things coming with no time for self and for reflection and for the things that you need to feel restored?
Yes, when I early on in my career, I had that philosophy of work hard and that's part of success. In order to be successful, you need to work hard. And I do believe there is value in working and being dedicated and committed. I also recognize that it's important that you do have harmony in your life. And when I was 23 years old, I was in medical sales and I was working during the week. I'd have night seminars where I'd be taking physicians out to dinner. I would be working trade shows on the weekends. And every third quarter, right around the summertime, I would break out in hives all over my chest. So here I was living in California wearing a high neck top, and I would have hives because I'd be trying to hide them. And that was a good indicator for my body of saying, you are burnt out, and I really should never get to that point. So, what I've learned to do now is I actually call it one of the exercises that I talk about in the book is I talk about doing a full body check. And so you stand in front of the mirror and you do this on a weekly basis and you look at yourself in the mirror. What are some of the indications that show that your body is communicating to you that you are burnt out? Some of that might be your hair is falling out. It might be dull, lifeless. It could be thinning. It may not be growing. Those are all signs of stress to the body. Acne could be one where your face is breaking out. Maybe it's dull. Maybe you're not hydrating enough. We know that even just 2% less of the hydration that we needed affects mental fatigue and our productivity. Then also going down, looking at your chest, do you have hives? That would be one indication of burnout. Moving down to your stomach, is your stomach in knots? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling worried? Are you having digestive challenges? But really looking at your body from a holistic point, from the top all the way down to the bottom. Another area that I look is also too, when turning around in your neck, are your shoulders up? Are you tense? That causes migraines. So understanding that our body communicates to us when we are burnt out, when we're stressed out and we're overwhelmed. And it's up to us to listen to when our body is communicating it to us and to be very in tune with those signs.
One of the recommendations that you give to people is to make sure that they have a strong support network. What are some ways that we can begin to build up our support networks and to make sure that they are in place for when challenges and difficulties occur?
There is a misconception that I believe that we have when it comes to asking for help. A lot of times people will view, well, I don't want to burden somebody by asking for help. But research actually shows that people that volunteer have a more fulfilling and happy life. Instead of thinking of asking for help as a burden onto others, why not think of asking for help as a way of bringing joy and fulfillment and purpose to somebody else's life? And I believe that when we ask for help, it is a way of building our community. It is a way of building our support network. So when we joke around and we say, ask your neighbor for if they ever need a cup of sugar, no, go over and ask them for maybe something a little bit more meaningful. Hey, I know that when I was going through postpartum depression, I remember going over my neighbors and I'm saying, I'm having a really tough day. Will you just come and sit with me and hang out? And a neighbor that I used to just go and say hi in passing, when I finally learned to ask for help and that just being spending time with me, we built such a close friendship that will last a lifetime. So get involved in your local neighborhood, get involved in your community, volunteer. You'll meet people in a support network through volunteering. Those are also people that get fulfillment out of helping others. And that's a way that you can build your network.
What are some of the ways that people can begin to identify their own personal stress triggers so that prior to getting to a place of burnout, they have allowed themselves to be self-aware enough to be proactive to prevent leading to burnout?
I believe that like I said, our body does communicate to us when we are burnt out, but also, are you finding that you're having a hard time focusing at work, maybe focusing on a particular task? Is your mind starting to wander a little bit? Are you having a hard time maybe being present? You think about the times when I put my kids to bed and I'm constantly thinking about the tasks that I should have done that day or I need to do tomorrow. that is a sign that I'm burnt out because I'm so focused in on the task versus being present in the moment.
I want to make sure that we move back a little bit in the direction of your book because both words that you chose to use are words that are very meaningful to me and for different reasons. I loved Angela Duckworth's book, Grit. I think it was brilliant and had so much research. And I love how her research was specifically based around not just the resilience aspect of it, but just a very practical application of it to be able to use in our lives. And then the other word is one that we haven't talked about yet, and I want to make sure that we get to, and that's the word unstoppable. When we think about the word unstoppable, I believe that it likely means more to you than just what is obvious. When you say unstoppable, what does that mean?
To me, unstoppable means to not let anybody define how you are able to show up, what success looks like for you. You are able to define success in your own story, in your own life, and to write the success story you're destined to be. So to me, unstoppable is you are in control of being able to move forward.
And that requires having some goals or some specific desires that you are moving forward towards. So when someone is thinking about what they really want, what it is that they view success as, what are the things that they want to frame their life around, what are some guidelines that they can use, some ways of thinking that might help support them in making choices that actually meet their deepest heart's desires?
That's a great question because I take readers through a series of activities and exercises throughout the book to help them gain clarity on what success means to them. One of the biggest challenges that I continue to hear from people that I'm working with right now, when they're thinking of, do I continue to stay in this career journey that I'm in now? Do I make a pivot? Do I start a business? Do I go for that promotion? Everyone's always saying, I want clarity. I want clarity on what that next step is going to look like. And it's not just a one size fits all approach. It's a different series and looking at our life from a 360 view and helping us gain clarity. One of the questions I always ask is a lot of times we focus on what do you want to do when you grow up? And instead of what do you want to do, it's who do you get to be? How do you want to show up in this world? And one of the exercises that I take readers through in the book is writing your own obituary. It's an interesting exercise. It's very self-reflective. But when I was going through a period where I felt like I had tied so much of my success to my job title and my paycheck and Fortune 500 senior sales managers, like I had tied my identity to that without truly understanding who I was as a person and how I wanted to be and what was the legacy and impact that I wanted to make on this world. So I wrote an obituary. I actually had just written my mom's obituary, so it was very top of mind. And it got me thinking of from a perspective of a colleague and then a perspective of a family member. And if my kids were up standing at my celebration of life tomorrow, what do I want them to say? How do I want to be remembered? And it wasn't about the job title or the paycheck or how much I had made. It had everything to do with how did I make people feel? And what was the legacy and the impact and the positive impact that I got to make on their lives? Did they feel cared for, loved for, supported? Did my colleagues feel inspired, empowered, and motivated? That was where I align myself now on what success looks like. It's not about the paycheck.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. My son's school had them do a project one year where they had to write a talk and then they invited all the parents to a lunch. And we were all there, and each student got up and said their piece about the parent that they chose to do their specific talk on. And so had the opportunity to, in essence, hear my son give an eulogy, so to speak, about me, or just an ability to just share his heart about who I am to him. And I think that was probably one of the most beautiful gifts that I've ever received, because it's not a conversation we would have typically have had the school not given them this assignment to do. But I think it's something that's very, very beneficial. I love the thought of writing our own eulogy and kind of what we want it to say at the end of our life. What do we want our lives to look like? But I also love for occasionally, if you're listening and you will take on the challenge to have ask your kids, write 5 sentences about what it is you would tell somebody else about me, to see what it is in your life that actually is coming to the forefront for them. If it's all about your career and it's all about what you've done and it's none of it's about who you are, it's a great time to take a little bit of self-reflection and see if you are showing up in that relationship with a level of authenticity and in the way that you actually want to show up. So that's how they begin to see you more of. So I love what you shared with that. We've been chatting with Danielle Cobo. She's the author of Unstoppable Grit. Break through the 7 roadblocks standing between you and achieving your goals. Danielle, I want to make sure people know how to get in contact with you and how to get a copy of your book.
My book is available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. And when they pre-order, the book is available on Amazon right now. And when they pre-order, they can go to my website, DanielleCobo.com, and they can go ahead and access a free courageous goal setting workbook, as well as the advanced chapter 1, because the book ships out February 21st. However, when they pre-order the book, they can go ahead and get that free courageous goal setting workbook.
Excellent. So we will include the show notes as well as a link to the book so that you'll have that information available. Danielle, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I was excited to be here. Enjoyed our conversation.
Until next time, everyone, live fully, love boldly, and rest intentionally.